The biggest welfare queens in this country are the giant corporations that don't pay a penny in federal taxes.
Y'all do realize that Greg Abbott and the Texas legislature could stop these data centers that are going to use up all our water, ruin our farmland, and threaten our power grid next week if they wanted to, just by calling a special session. But they won't, because the people currently in power in Texas have received millions upon millions of dollars to their political campaigns.
Texas is getting harder and harder to live in. Food costs more, gas prices are up, and housing is going from a normal goal to a burden that is out of reach for a lot of families. Some people still go to work every day and still try to spend responsibly, but at the end of the month they are still wondering where their paycheck went. More and more Texans are being forced to ask for help, not because they stopped trying, but because the promises that once made them believe in a stable future never came true. They were promised that growth would bring opportunity, low taxes would make life easier, and hard work would eventually pay off. But reality is telling a much colder story. Today, join me as we take an honest look at what life is really like for people in Texas. You will see that what is going wrong here is spreading across the entire country. You will also see why some promises sound great but have almost no chance of ever becoming reality. This is a video you cannot afford to miss whether you live in Texas or anywhere else. Texas is still growing, but its people are falling behind. Before I tell you exactly what is going wrong in Texas, take a look at these numbers. These are the results of a Fox News survey conducted from July 23rd through July 27th, 2026 among 1,006 registered voters in Texas. They were asked a very specific question. When it comes to their personal finances, do they feel like they are getting ahead, staying where they are, or falling behind? Only 16% said they were getting ahead, 49% said they were staying where they were, and 35% said they were falling behind. Put simply, out of every 100 voters surveyed, only 16 felt like their finances were improving. 35 felt like things were getting worse. Nearly half were just trying to hold on to where they were. A lot of people will focus on that 35%. I am looking at the 16%. Texas keeps talking about growth jobs and opportunity. But if only 16 out of 100 voters feel like their financial lives are getting better, then those growth numbers are clearly not telling the whole story. I do not see the 49% who said they were staying where they were as good news either. The survey did not ask exactly where they were struggling, so we cannot say that they were all in a crisis. But in real life, staying in place can mean you are still paying the mortgage, but no longer saving, still insured, but afraid to see a doctor, still going to work every day, but knowing one car repair could throw off your entire month. That same survey also asked which issue mattered most when voters decided how to cast their Senate ballot. 37% chose inflation and the high prices. Only 18% chose immigration and border security. The border is still a major issue in Texas, but at the time of the survey, prices were mentioned more than twice as often. In the Senate race, James Talarico received 51%, while Ken Paxton received 48%. That 3-point gap fell within the survey's margin of error, so this was a close race, not proof that Talarico had a definite lead. I am not looking at 51% versus 48% and declaring that Texas has turned blue. That would be way too easy and way too early. The survey also does not prove that the people falling behind had switched their support to Talarico. But it does make the situation very clear most voters do not feel like they are getting ahead. Prices are their biggest concern, and a race once considered safe for Republicans has now become very close. Texas has long promised that low taxes, plenty of jobs, and a business-friendly environment would help hardworking people build stable lives. To understand why that promise is losing its power, we need to take a closer look at the very model that built the image of Texas. America's symbol of growth is starting to crack.
Unfortunately, this is just where we're at now, and it didn't happen in New York, it didn't happen in California, it happened in red Fort Worth, Texas.
You may be asking, why are we putting so much attention on Texas? Rising prices are not happening in only here. And if you are looking only at the political map, Texas is not the first place people think of when they hear about a surprise race. But Texas is not just a red state. For years, Texas has been held up as proof that low taxes, fewer regulations, and a business-friendly model can create a better life. The promise is easy to understand. No state personal income tax businesses are encouraged to invest, jobs grow, and workers get to keep more of their money. Texas did not just invite companies to come build factories. The state also gave people a clear message: come here, work hard, and you will have a chance to build a more stable life. To be fair, that promise was not all advertising. Texas is still attracting people and businesses. The 5 fastest growing cities in the country with populations of at least 20,000 are all in Texas. I am not denying that growth. But I also refuse to use the number of companies moving in as a substitute for the more important question. After all the bills are paid, how much does a family actually have left? And this is where the Texas model starts running into a contradiction. More people moving in means more homes, more roads, more schools, more electricity, and more water are needed. If housing and infrastructure cannot keep up, prices rise. Texas once had a housing shortage of around 306,000 homes compared with demand. This is the part I cannot ignore. The very success the state uses to attract new people may also be making life more expensive for the people who already live there. So why is this story heating up right now? Because the candidate selection process is over. A close race in Texas is not the same as a close race in a swing state. This is happening inside a stronghold where Republicans are used to not having to worry very much. In my opinion, the whole country is watching Texas because it is a very clear test when prices and bills become the biggest concern. How strong is party loyalty really? But voters do not live on political calculations made in Washington. They live on housing costs, insurance, food, and utilities. And that is why we need to look directly at the expenses that are actually taking money out of their pockets. What are people being forced to carry?
My groceries, I used to pay between $150 to $200. Last week, I went and purchased the same amount of groceries that I usually do, and I ended up paying almost $320 something. I used to fill up my tank with $45, $50. Now I spend $60, $70, almost $80 filling up the tank. Well, we used to go out and be able to go out and eat, at least once or twice a week. We can't do that no more.
You do not have to live in Texas to understand this feeling. You just have to know what it is like to get a pay cover housing and insurance, food, and utilities. Then look at your account and wonder, where did all the money I just earned go? And every election season, everyone promises to help. One person promises tax cuts. Another promises higher wages, cheaper housing, and lower healthcare costs. Relief is always talked about like it is only one vote away. But rent does not wait until November. Insurance premiums do not pause while two candidates debate. Medical bills do not care who is ahead. Before we decide which promise sounds more believable, let us be clear about what they are promising to fix. Housing is the first major expense. More than half of the roughly 4.1 million renter households in Texas spend over 30% of their income on housing. That means once they keep a roof over their heads, they have less money left for food, childcare, transportation, and savings. Then there is insurance. The preliminary average annual home insurance premium in Texas for 2025 was $3,506 USD. That is an average, so not every family pays the same amount, but it shows just how expensive protecting a home has become. Healthcare is even more complicated. There are monthly premiums, deductibles, copays, prescriptions, and surprise bills. Across the United States, employer-sponsored family health insurance premiums were close to $27,000 USD in 2025, with workers paying an average of $6,850 USD out of their own paychecks. Weekly expenses quietly eat away at whatever is left. In Dallas, Fort Worth, food prices rose 2.2%, while energy prices jumped 18.9% during the 12 months ending in May 2026. For families with young children, childcare can decide whether one parent is able to keep working at all. The median cost in Texas was once estimated at around $892 USD per month, while more than 100,000 children were waiting for assistance by the end of 2025. And here's the real problem: Texans have not stopped working. Hourly wages still rose 1.9% during the year ending in April to 2026. But if housing, insurance, and childcare swallow every extra dollar, families are still working harder just to stay in the same place. Everyone promises to fix this. Talarico did something different first. He pulled all those separate bills together into one political story. Talarico turned those bills into a political indictment.
Risk as well.
The biggest welfare queens in this country are the giant corporations that don't pay a penny in federal taxes. The biggest welfare queens are the CEOs who get a tax deduction for flying on a private jet. It's not hungry kids. It's not working parents who work multiple jobs to provide for their families.
People do not need Talarico to explain that food, insurance, and housing are expensive. They are the ones paying those bills. What they have been missing is a clear enough explanation that ties everything together. To me, that is what Talarico does best. He did not discover some new kind of pain. He gave a name to pain that has been around for a long time: the affordability crisis. First, he built the image of someone who listens before acting like he has all the answers. Talarico says he traveled through big cities, small towns, red areas, and blue areas. According to him, wherever he went, people talked about how much harder it had become to pay for basic needs. I am not naive enough to believe that campaigning in a lot of places automatically proves a candidate understands all of Texas. This is still how a campaign builds an image. But you have to admit, it is a very smart way to do it. The message he is sending is simple. I am not sitting in Washington guessing what your life is like. I came to where you live and I listen to you. The next step is the strongest part. Talarico says people are not struggling because they bought luxury cars, expensive clothes, or fancy vacations. They're spending money on food, gas, healthcare, insurance, and utilities. That list of bills is nothing unusual. What matters is the message behind it. You are not struggling just because you are irresponsible. To me, this is the line that connects most strongly with working and middle-class people. They do not want pity. They want their hard work, discipline, and careful spending to be recognized. Talarico changes the question from why are you not managing your money better to why does a normal life cost this much? Then he brings very different experiences into the same story. Renters may worry about rent, homeowners worry about insurance, young families worry about childcare, older people worry about medicine and hospitals bills. Talarico is not saying they all live the same way. He is saying they share the same problem that unavoidable expenses are taking more and more of their income. This is where his message becomes more than a list of complaints. People have different bills. Talarico gives them one name. At a campaign stop in Dallas, he again listed food, gas insurance, utilities, house and childcare, and prescription drugs. He said the campaign wanted to focus on issues that directly affect Texans, instead of letting the race get completely swallowed by the usual attacks. But Talarico does not stop with the recent rise in prices. He takes the story back several decades. The way he explains it, today's crisis was built by wages failing to keep up, workers losing power, and more of the economy's gains being concentrated at the top. Then he gives the story of a villain. According to Talarico, economic power has become concentrated in the hands of billionaires, major corporations, political donors, and people wealthy enough to influence the rules. His campaign website describes the main conflict as not just left versus right, but top versus bottom. He argues that fights over party, race, gender, and religion often keep people from looking at how money and power are actually being distributed. Talarico also turns economics into a question of dignity. As a former teacher and someone who often speaks in the language of faith, he frames the issue in moral terms. If someone works full-time and still cannot afford a normal life, how much does that system really respect work? When talking about healthcare, he says he once had to put $684 USD on a credit card to pay for his first month of insulin, then used that experience to argue that healthcare should not depend entirely on someone's ability to pay. To me, this is why Talarico does not sound like someone reading from a policy sheet. He turns a list of expenses into a question of right and wrong. Still, a powerful story has to survive a serious test. Talarico proposes a federal minimum wage of 15 USD stronger, overtime protections, help for small businesses adjusting to the new wage, a public insurance option, lower drug costs, expanded support for families, and limits on the power of major corporations in the housing market. I think he is talking about the pain of the middle class more clearly than Paxton is. But I'm not ready to give him the ending just because the opening sounds good. Which policies would actually lower prices? Which ones would only give people more money to survive prices that stay high? Who benefits? Who pays? And how much can one senator really accomplish? Before we answer those questions, let us listen again to what Paxton has to say. Paxton says the answer is in people's pockets. After listening to Talarico, it is easy to feel like only one side is talking about people's bills. But that would not be fair. Paxton also has a clear economic answer, one that fits conservative thinking. Instead of building more large government programs, the government should take less money and let families decide how to use their own income. Paxton's plan focuses on tax benefits for healthcare, housing, and children. He proposes allowing individuals to deduct up to $25,000 USD in out-of-pocket medical expenses, plus another $25,000 USD for each dependent. He also wants a $50,000 USD deduction for first-time homebuyers, an expanded child tax credit of up to $4,400 USD, and permanent savings accounts for young children. I understand why that approach appeals to a lot of Texans, but we need to pay close attention. A $50,000 USD deduction does not mean the government sends you $50,000 USD. According to the IRS, a deduction only reduces the portion of your income that gets taxed. A tax credit directly reduces the amount of tax you owe, and some credits can be refunded, even when you do not owe much in taxes. That leads to the most important question: who actually benefits the most? A family that already earning enough to buy a home and paying a lot in taxes may get more value from the deduction. But what about someone who cannot even save enough for a down payment? Can a family struggling to pay this month's insurance bill wait until tax season? Paxton's plan may help people who have already made it to the door. I have not seen it fully explain how it helps people who are still standing far away from that door. I do not think tax-based support is useless. It can make a real difference for a lot of families, but where the money comes from is not some fine print we can ignore. Whether the plan can actually happen also depends on Congress passing it, and whether the lost government revenue would be covered by spending cuts, more debt, or another source. Talarico wants to change the way markets and policy create costs. Paxton wants the government to take less of people's income. One side is stronger at diagnosing the structure. The other speaks in language that fits the instincts of Texas voters very well. The question for each family is, this is your bigger problem, the amount of tax you pay or the original price of housing insurance and health care. But this election may not be decided by that economic question. Trump and Paxton have another way to pull voters back, although it is starting to backfire too. Trump and Paxton want to change the question of the election. Do not mistake a race that talks a lot about prices for a race that will be decided entirely by prices. A voter may worry about the mortgage in the morning but still vote on election day because of the border school's religion or the feeling that Texas is changing too quickly. Trump has not only promised immigration policies. His administration has expanded construction of the border wall, deployed the military and National Guard restored. A program requiring some asylum seekers to wait in Mexico, increased ICE staffing, and expanded detention capacity inside the country. Paxton has tied himself directly to that agenda. He promises to help Trump finish the border wall, increase deportations, and defend sovereignty. At the same time, his campaign has expanded the race into guns, abortion, gender, women's sports, parental rights, and school content. This is how Paxton defines the election. It is not just about choosing a senator, but deciding whether Texas values will be protected. I understand why that message is powerful. After years of chaos, people want to see the law enforced, and the results at the border are real. CBP reported that detected crossings at the southwest border in May 2025 were down 93% from the same month 1 year earlier. The Department of Agriculture said 42% of hired crop workers from 2020 through 2022 did not have legal work authorization after enforcement raids in California in 2025. Reuters reported that some farms lost as much as 70% of their workforce. Fruits and vegetables were left unharvested and spoiled in the fields. That is evidence from California, not all of Texas. But the lesson is clear and applies everywhere you can remove workers from a field through an enforcement operation, but you cannot order the crops to harvest themselves. In the Rio Grande Valley, builders said fear of being arrested by IC kept workers home and slowed construction. Construction employment in the area fell 5% in the third quarter of 2025. If Texas already has a housing shortage and the workforce building homes keep shrinking, immigration policy could make the pressure on housing prices even worse. Voters are starting to see the difference between the goal and the method. A Reuters Ipsos poll from February 2026 found that 61% supported deporting undocumented immigrants, but 60% believed enforcement had gone too far. By April, 52% said they were less likely to support a candidate who stood with Trump's deportation methods. Among independent voters, that number was 57%. Talarico proposes prioritizing criminals, gangs, and human traffickers while expanding legal work permits for agriculture and construction. But he also has to prove how the border would be controlled. I am not choosing between a chaotic border and unlimited raids. I am choosing a harder standard. A policy has to enforce the law without creating labor shortages, raising costs, and causing consequences that voters themselves end up paying for. The race is closed, but Texas has not changed colors. After all the arguments about prices, taxes, and immigration, we need to return to the numbers that opened this story. Talarico at 51%, Paxton at 48%. I do not believe one poll can declare a winner. But it is enough to break an old assumption: this race is no longer as predictable as a lot of people once thought. This is not the only poll showing a close contest either. Another July survey had Talarico at 45% and Paxton at 40%, with a margin of error of 3.4 points. The numbers are not exactly the same, because the timing the people surveyed and the methods may be different. What matters is that several polls are pointing in the same direction. Neither side has a large enough advantage to treat the result as certain. But we need to keep a very clear boundary. The Fox survey shows that many voters do not feel like they are getting ahead financially. It also shows Talarico competing closely with Paxton. The public data does not prove that people facing financial hardship have switched their support to Talarico. Both things can happen at the same time without one directly causing the other. A poll measures what voters say during a few days in July. An election measures what they actually do in November. Between now and then, the result could still change because of turnout advertising debates, the economy, and events that have not happened yet. Texas is still a place where Democrats have not won a statewide race in more than 3 decades. Voting habits and organizational advantages do not disappear because of a few close poll results. I do not look at these numbers and conclude that Texas has changed colors. I only see a race that used to look predictable becoming close enough that every promise from both campaigns deserves more serious scrutiny. And that is what the final section will do, not predict who wins, but put every promise through the same test of mechanism on authority, cost, and results. After all, the promises of the bills are still the real test. Both Talarico and Paxton have correctly identified part of the pain. One says the system is tilted toward major corporations and the wealthy. The other says the government takes too much and lets families keep too little. But to me, correctly naming the pain is only the beginning. The harder part is proving which bill a policy will change, how it will change it, and how long that will take. A federal senator can influence taxes, health insurance, labor law, immigration, and the budget. But a senator does not control all electricity prices, property taxes, local zoning, or insurance premiums in Texas. And no matter how big a proposal sounds, one senator cannot turn it into law alone. That is the first limit every promise has to face. The second limit is cost. Raising wages can help workers, but businesses have to adjust. Expanding public insurance can create more choices, but it needs funding and a plan that actually works. Tax deductions can help some families keep more money, but the real value depends on income and how much tax those families already pay. I do not believe in solutions where nobody pays, when a campaign only tells us who benefits but does not say where the cost lands. The story is still missing its most important part. We also need to be very clear about this: cutting taxes is not the same as cutting prices. A deduction can lower your tax bill, but it does not automatically make a house cheaper. A subsidy can help pay an insurance premium, but it does not necessarily make a hospital or drug company lower its prices. Arguments about the border, religion, or culture may matter deeply to a lot of people, but they do not replace questions about how the economy actually works. And a promise, no matter how good it sounds, is still just a promise if it cannot survive questions about authority, funding, and real results. Promises always sound good, but there is always a gap between a promise and reality. And maybe it is not just you. A lot of other people have hoped, waited, and eventually realized that life still has not gotten much easier. The truth is, what most of us want is not that extravagant. Not everyone needs to become rich. A lot of people just want a steady job, a home that does not drain them, one illness that does not destroy the whole family, and enough money left over to believe next month might be easier than this one. That used to be the heart of the American dream: work hard, live responsibly, and still have the right to dream about a better future. What do you think? Share, honestly. This is a place where you can talk about what you are going through without having to put on a show for anyone. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel, because this is a place that values every voice, every story, and every real concern.